Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly webinar. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director of the SBDC Center in Louisville, Kentucky. As you come in and get settled, I'd like to take a few minutes to share some info about the Kentucky SBDC program. The Kentucky Small Business Development Center is a statewide program providing the professional expertise, tools, and information necessary for entrepreneurs to start, fund, and grow their businesses. We do this at no cost, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration, the University of Kentucky, as well as regional universities, colleges, and local economic development agencies. To learn more, visit KentuckySBDC.com, and there you'll find additional resources I know you'll find very helpful. And when you go to that website, at the top of the webinar, top of the screen, you'll see the Wednesday webinar button to get info and register for next week's webinar. And if you check the subscribe button, you'll actually be automatically enrolled in all upcoming webinars. And so even if you can't attend, you'll receive a replay link in your inbox later on in the afternoon, so you can watch anytime you like. And also on the toolbar, if you click on the More tab and scroll down to Webinars, you'll find replays to all the webinars we've done over the past year. And I'd like to take a moment to thank Robin for suggesting I tell everyone about that and quit keeping that a secret. So thank you, Robin, for pushing me on that. If you'd like to request personal assistance, please reach out to us at email at info@kentuckysbdc.com or give us a call at 1-888-414-7232. And so as always, if you look to the right of your screen, you'll find the chat feature. So if you have any questions for our presenter, you can post them here. And we will answer them at the end of the presentation or even during the presentation sometimes. So just to make sure that everything's working and you can hear me loud and clear, do me a favor and say hello. Tell us your name and where you're joining from. So we've got a few people jumping in there already. So we have Prem, Mary, Truck. Good to see everybody today. We've had quite a few people from all over the world lately. There's Mount Sterling and Lexington. I think last week we actually had a couple folks from Indonesia, so welcome to everybody. Hey, Dwayne, good to see you again. Again, I'm Dave Etkin. I'm the director here at the Louisville Center, and the Louisville Center is one of 17 centers throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And just a reminder, later on this afternoon, you will receive a recording of today's webinar in your email. Today we have a great guest. Foster McCarl. He is with Action Coach. He's a great resource, and I've been really kind of focused in on leadership and culture, and it all kind of boils down into employee retention and building that culture and communicating, effectively with folks and the people you deal with. And Foster is a spectacular resource that I go to a lot, and so I hope you'll take advantage of him. And welcome, Foster. Good to see you today.
Right, there we go.
There we go.
Okay. Didn't think you guys would want to hear me. Who knows? Maybe breathing intently while I make sure everything's set up over here. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. David, thank you very much. Thank you to the SBDC for the opportunity to come and talk to you. I know how wonderful and soothing my voice is. However, I would appreciate not listening to myself the entire time. So this is meant to be an interactive workshop and not just me spinning things out at you for the duration of, and I just looked, I was not prepared for this. It shows that the room expiration is in 3 hours and 55 minutes. So you guys might want to buckle up and use the restroom. We've got a lot of material to make up for. I'm just kidding. We'll get you out of here in time.
Yeah, I'm going to click the button at 1 o'clock. So
yeah, it's over at 1, no matter what we say or do. So, okay. So let's just start out. So we're talking about communication today, which is extremely important. Obviously, it's one of the things that makes everything buzz. We want to learn how to communicate with power and impact, and that's why we're here. So the agenda today, we don't have a lot of time. This is normally a 3-hour session, and I'm putting into 1. And so some of the things we're going to speed through a little bit. The housekeeping, we'll talk about introductions, disc, And that'll be funny for people as we learn that are of a certain disc profile, because they want a lot more information than simply disc. So I poke a little bit of fun too while I do this. And then we're going to close. So housekeeping, pay attention. If you've got your email open, just close it, put your phone on mute. It's only an hour. Unless you're a doctor, if you're on call, please keep your phone on. Take notes, and I'm not going to send this presentation out to you. You really don't want me to, and I'll explain why. The notes that you're going to be taking are going to have to do with your life, your situation, your communication, challenges, and strengths. So the notes that you're going to take are going to have to do with you. And afterwards, I'm always happy to talk to anybody about this that may have any questions. But during this, please do not wait to ask questions. If I haven't yet, I'm definitely going to make sure David knows he's got full right to interrupt me at any time. Okay, so to ask questions specifically. So my introduction, this is my family, my wife, Nikki, my two little dudes. So I'm 47 years old, and I have a 2.5-year-old and an 8-month-old. So you can imagine my communication skills are being tried every single day. And in the bottom right-hand corner is my daughter, Emma, and she just turned, she's 18 and a half now. And on the left are all the men in our family, in our little nucleus right there. But I'm really, really grateful and blessed. And I love, love, love what I do. So DISC. So what is DISC? So DISC is an assessment tool that was essentially developed based on the works of Dr. William Moulton Marston. He was a physiological psychologist from Harvard, and a lot of the work that he did was the basis for the first lie detector test. And he dealt with, blood pressure and things like that, how it affects communication. And so he was also the creator of Wonder Woman. So I think there's a movie out recently, Dr. Marston and his women, or whatever it was called, and it was because he created Wonder Woman. None of that's important other than to understand where this came from. A lot of people like using assessments like PI and things like that, which are great. I think the more assessments, the merrier. I don't think that we should necessarily, focus on only one type of assessment, because there are so many different aspects to how people communicate, how they perceive themselves in communication, that we can learn from a lot of different assessments. So what is DISC? DISC is a behavior assessment. I may slip up now and then I may say something about personality, but it is not personality. This is not Myers-Briggs. This is not who you are at your deepest level. I am not a therapist, and we're not going to dig deep into your childhood. Some of you are probably really grateful for that right now on the call. I don't think you were expecting to do that from a level of communication, but there are 4 main behavioral communication traits that we're going to talk about. And this is just about behaviors, which, as we know, can change. So what DISC is not, it is not who you are. It's just how you communicate. Not one is better than the other. A lot of people will think that, I grew up in a household that was who's loudest wins. And a lot of these, we'll talk more about the DISC. A lot of them are louder than others. It's not a tool or a stereotype for other people, but what we are going to talk about is we are going to talk about acknowledging and having a certain awareness for individuals and the way they communicate in order to better communicate with them. So it's not about manipulation. It's about determining how we can best communicate with them. It's not definitive and it's not unchanging. So why DISC? Why is DISC important? Well, for me, so I did a search on Amazon, and I think we've got a little bit of a cutoff on the screen. Sorry about that. So that currently lists, Amazon currently lists, wow, if I could figure that out, that'd be great. 360,000 books with the words communicator, communication, their title. There are 63,482 with the word talk. Listen, that's less than half that. Isn't that interesting? And just for context, there's like 87,000 vampire. I just think it's funny to see what we actually read. So the golden rule. If we had more time, I would ask people to put their hand up for what the golden rule is. Of course, we know the golden rule is treat others the way We want to be treated. Well, how many people out there want to be treated the way Foster wants to be treated? I kind of hope nobody, because we're all unique. I'd be very surprised if anybody wanted to be treated the way I want to be treated. So when it comes to communication, this is extremely important. A lot of times, this is one of the biggest learnings that people have. We practice the platinum rule, which states we treat others the way they want to be treated. I need to communicate with other people the way they need to be communicated with, because the best idea means nothing if I can't communicate it. Very simple. So communication is the response that you receive. It's not what you say. Calvin Coolidge was great. No man ever listened to himself out of a job. True. And my other favorite quote is, a good conversation's like a mini skirt, short enough to retain interest, but long enough to cover the subject. And this is anonymous, but I think it may have been Churchill. It's always difficult to trace some of these back, but this is not just about communicating at people. Okay. It's about listening as well. So there are four main disc types. Four main disc types are dominance, influence, steadiness, critical thinking. If you look online, or if you have any experience with this, and by the way, if you have experience with this, go ahead and type it in the comment box. Let me know. Or if you have any questions as we're going through, do not wait till the end, please, because it can a lot of times strike up better conversation as we go through this in the moment. So if you go online and do some research, D is dominance and I is influential. Those are pretty much stay standard, but the S and the C often change. S has also been called submissive. C has been critical is one, but it's a little more of a negative connotation. Steadiness and critical thinking are a lot more positive, and I think represent what the disc styles are more. So we're going to dig into each one of these. The first thing we have to know is we have to know when we do a disc assessment, and towards the end, I'm going to have David send out not right now though, or else nobody will listen to me. You'll just be reading. You're going to send out an assessment or a sample assessment. And this is just something that you can get. There's some boilerplate information in there, something so you can get a better idea of what the communication styles are and how it works and what a report looks like. The quote unquote offer, I guess I have, if anybody wants an assessment, I'll work out getting you an assessment. And yeah, Sonia, communication is listening. Oh man, I'll tell you what, anybody ever hear the 5 to 2 rule is what I call it? For every 5 minutes of listening, you get 2 minutes of talking. It's a tough one. So in the assessment though, you'll see in the sample, there are 2 different measurements. There's natural and adapted. So natural, that's pretty much how we behave communication-wise when nobody's looking. And then adapted, it's situational. So a lot of times for people, when I do this based on what I do, the adapted part is how they operate at work versus the natural is how they operate outside of work or when they're not really trying. We like those to be very similar. So we kind of break this down, the disc, as you can see, DISC, we break this down into 4 kind of quadrants, right? So the top 2 are more of the outgoing traits, the dominant and influential. The bottom are more reserved or introverted, right? That's where the C, or compliant or critical thinking, and the S, the steady ones, are. So they're more introverted, a little bit more quiet. On the left side, we have task-oriented versus the right side, which is people-oriented. So you can kind of imagine the difference between dominant and outgoing people. Dominant are they're outgoing, but they're focused on task, as opposed to an influential, which the eyes are very outgoing and very excited, but they're more focused on people than task. And we'll talk about how some of this is going to play out. So if we break down, this is me, just so you can see what my disc is. So remember I said the natural versus adaptive. The fortunate thing is my natural and my adaptive are really pretty similar. I actually just left my coaching firm. I'm still a action coach with Action Coach, but when I was in that coaching firm, this is only about a month and a half ago, there's another person that was a very high D. So even though I have a very high natural D, in that circumstance, I didn't need it. In fact, it actually worked against me. So you can see the adapted style on there. I actually cranked my D down in the adaptive. So the only thing that you want to look for if you do an assessment for this on yourself, if the natural style and the adaptive style are way different, if there's a significant difference between the two of them, it's going to be hard to keep up the adaptive style for long, or somebody may have to be honest with themselves and say, you know what, I'm doing this, but I'm not really happy about it. So this is the wheel, the communication wheel. It just kind of breaks down these, the natural and adaptive into different kind of wordings and how assertive you are versus persuasive, et cetera. And that's kind of where I'm at. So my natural behavior is I'm very assertive, very persuasive, but my adaptive side, you can see I drop down on the D a little bit and the I takes over. So I'm more persuasive in this case. So what do these mean? All right, so the D. And by the way, when you guys see one that's yours, I want you to just put it in the comment box. And you're like, oh, that's me. Now, we're covering this in a very broad stroke. So I don't want anybody thinking there are not only 4, there are thousands and thousands of different combinations times 2, because there's adaptive versus natural. So these things, when we talk about like stereotyping and doing a little bit more or a little bit less digging and just kind of glazing over the surface saying, oh, that guy looks like a high D, I'm a high I, et cetera. We're just doing that for an educational simplicity. And we always dig into it later. But so dominance, they're very driving, they're dynamic, they're doers, they're determined, they're decisive. And by the way, when you see yourself in one of these, please go ahead and put it in the chat box, because I want to see, quote unquote, who's on the other side. Okay. So those are the D's. The I's. I's are fun. They're the influential. So they're impressive. Notice we have all the same letters. Interesting, inspirational, interactive, impressionable. These are the people that you want to have at your party, right? They're very, quote, influential. The S's are wonderful. All right, Phyllis, we got Phyllis who's a high D. And the reason, not just because she said she's a high D, but a high D is going to put dominance, or I'm surprised you actually spelled it all the way out, Phyllis, because usually they won't do it. Just be like D. And I is going to say, I think I'm a high I because blah, blah, blah. People always say, I know it's a bad example, but that we could see that come through in so many different ways. So it's like, you ask me the question, I'm a high D. I'm very direct. This is what I am. So an S, people that are high S's. My wife is an S. She's actually an SC. They're very sentimental, very supportive. They're specialists in what they do. They're shy, but they're very stable. Okay. The important thing to remember about S's, they do not like to rock the boat. They're very caring. When you talk to an S, man, I'll tell you what, you feel like you're the only person in the world. You're so important to that one individual. They're talking and listening, and they're really involving you in that conversation. You're the only person that matters. That Lisa, I think Lisa says, you're saying you're an S, Lisa. So Lisa's wonderful. D's need S's because D's drive through the wall to get to where they're going. And the S's pick up the pieces and be like, listen, they didn't mean it. Okay, so C's. Oh, C's are wonderful. C's, critical thinking, very careful and calculated. They're competent and cautious. They do not like to rush into anything. If you are a C and you are going to buy a car, the first thing is you've got to love all the online car buying. So then you don't even have to talk to a person. You can just make a spreadsheet with all the information. Let me know if there's any C's out here so I know who I'm talking to. You don't even have to talk to anybody. You can't, yes, Melania, you can be a D and an I. You can see from me, I have a D and an I, and we'll, like I said, afterwards, we'll have my contact information. David will send it out. And if you want to contact me, and we'll get you an assessment done an actual DISC assessment yourself, and it will break down specifically what it is. So, Carla, I need to be a C. Okay, we'll talk about it. The first step in the process is knowing who you are, right? Know thyself. Then we can talk about ways that you can identify how other people communicate. And then we can determine what we need to shift. And if anybody wants it, I am a business coach, so I'm going to give you a little homework today. You don't have to do it, but yes. So there's an almost infinite set of combinations for all these D, I, S, and C. And if I go back real quick, I'll go back to where mine was. Okay, so if you look at mine here, I've got two. Let's just look at my natural. So natural, the red is D, I is influential, yellow is high, et cetera, S and C. So you can see like that threshold, like 50 is that threshold, means that above that, those above 50 on the scoring, they're really apparent. So my D and my I are really apparent. So yes, there is always overlap. Right. There's always an opportunity for these things to cross. And honestly, like I said, it's not definitive. There are times, I mean, I'll act a certain way, or you could have, a high S who doesn't like conflict. Well, you put their kids at risk, they'll jump in. It has nothing to do with how they communicate, right? There are certain circumstances that do the DISC does not dictate your actions. But in everyday communication, we're just talking about the generality. So B plus need to be a C. Thanks, Teresa. So yes, there is an overlap. So there's an overlap of all these things, as you can see. So my S is the lowest in my natural, which doesn't mean I don't care about people, but it means that I may not be the most patient, and I may make decisions if I'm not in charge of my communication. If I'm not in charge of my DISC, I may make decisions that can negatively affect other people without checking with them first. My C being so low means I don't really need a lot of process. You know, I can get away with not a lot of process, and be comfortable. Now, that doesn't mean I'll necessarily be effective. It just means I'm not wired to need a process and spreadsheets and everything else. But I've learned that I really because that's an area that I'm deficient in, I sometimes will overcompensate for that. So does that make sense, everybody? There's definitely overlap on all of these. Very few people have I ever seen that are pure. There's always some of the other three. I've seen some that are really high, like we call them bleeding Ds. I've seen some bleeding Ds. I've seen some really hardcore Cs where everything else is pretty low, but there's usually a pretty good mix. So the Cs, we talked about that. Critical thinking, contemplative, cautious. So a C, buying a car, it probably takes months, if not longer, because C's just want it. There's a lot of information they need to know. They need to know now. A D is going to go out and do it and be done in like a day or an hour. Because they just want to get it over and done with and move on with their lives. But a C, there's always more information. So that's the positive side of these. And again, any questions, please go ahead and throw them in here. The negatives. Let's talk about the negatives. So a high D, when they are scared or pressured, right? Or they go too far into their communication style, they can become egotistical, very nervy and demanding, very aggressive, right? They will, they can lash out. They can be really loud as well. And they're not trying to be mean necessarily, but when they get tipped over to that other side, what used to be a really positive, driving personality, right? Somebody who's like, let's go, this is great. That can flip. And then it becomes kind of negative. So the eyes on the other side, the important thing with eyes, become very self-promoting when they get into a spot. Unrealistic. The challenges they want to take on are challenges for the team, or they're just way out of whack just because they can't see where I don't want to say where reality starts, but they get too nervy about things, so they decide to shoot for something really, really high. And they talk a lot. High eyes will fill space with the sound of their voice, But part of it also is a lot of times, high I's being one myself, we actually can process audibly. So I will not be able to, or I can now, but before I really learned a lot about this, I wouldn't be able to travel all the way through my thoughts without hearing me talk about them out loud and talking my way through them. My wife is an SC, which means she doesn't say anything unless she means it and she's thought through it a whole bunch of times. Hey, how was your day? Good. Okay. She says to me, hey, Foster, how was your day? Oh, it was good. I had these 2 calls and this new person came into the office. I recognized them. Do you remember we went to that thing? There was this thing from the nonprofit a couple of years ago at the Ice House. And anyway, you start going through that. She's like, okay. All I did was ask you how your day was. But I start connecting these things in my head as an I. But on the negative side, they get really gabby. And again, overly optimistic. Too much. They can think they can handle too much. S's, when S's become pressure, they become hesitant. They slow way down. They're very inflexible. They do not want to be pushed. They're non-demonstrative, so you won't know how they feel about something. They're great poker players. They will just keep that dry, deadpan face because that's their defense mechanism. They seem to be unconcerned with the situation when actually they're just keeping it all inside, right? They don't really want to let that out. And the C's, critical thinking, they get really picky and pessimistic. They get so critical. If one thing is wrong, they will actually look at this. If something, again, this is when they're pushed on the, it's just not every time they find something wrong, but if a situation really pushes them into the negative, they're going to all of a sudden pick out every single part of this process that doesn't work. And they're going to explain why it's not going to work more. And by the way, you don't do this and you never did this and you don't follow this process. You don't do this, etc. The C's can actually be, what's the word? Not stoic. They can actually seemingly come across aggressive enough to look like a D. Because if you cross a C, cross that threshold of trust, we're going to have some big problems. Because C's believe that there is a right way and there is a wrong way. And all joking aside with these, their way is the right way. C's are not big risk takers. To get a C to try something new will probably only happen after they've had a lot of time to evaluate it and ask questions. So what I like to say, sorry, I'll skip that for a second. So the blanket example for people to remember, if you want to write down something specific about these, I like people to remember or think about this story. So if I'm standing at a pool, right, and I've got a pure D, I, S, and C standing next to me, and I say, okay, everybody, the goal is to jump in the pool. Well, a D is pure D. They're going to jump in the pool before I'm even done with the question. They don't care. They don't even know. They don't care if there's water in it. They're achieving that goal. Bang. They're going to be first. They're going to win and move on to the next thing. An I will jump in the pool, but an I is going to jump in the pool. They usually want people to see them do it because it inspires people. So they'll be standing on the diving board saying, okay, everybody, jumping in the pool. They want to make sure everybody notices because it's inspirational. And S will jump in the pool along with everybody else, holding hands at the same time. Come on. Oh, wait, let's wait for Bill. He's coming. He's late getting something out of his car, but he's coming to the pool. They want everybody to be included. And a C, some of it you can identify with this, might never jump in the pool. Why are we jumping in the pool? How long are we staying in the pool? Where are we jumping? Is there water in the pool? What's the pH balance? How long are we staying in? Where's the ladder to get out? Why are we doing this again? They want to make sure all those bases are covered. They're not just going to go for it just because somebody says, hey, here's the goal. Whereas the D is already on to the next thing, right? So that's an easy example that I like to give to differentiate between the pure D, I, S, and C. Now, I want you to think about this and write this down. And if you want to put it in here, I may not be able to comment on everybody's, but if you would like to put the answers to this in here, what trait of your communication skill is most evident? It could be positive or negative, right? So is it that you are, positive and outgoing? Are you very direct? Are you very process driven? If you want to go ahead and put it in the box, just one trait that you have heard about your communication style says, you know what, that I really identify with. This is something that I've always known about myself. Maybe it is I like to talk a lot. Maybe it is I've never been in a room with a stranger. Strangers are just people that I have yet to reminisce with. D's, if you're a D, you can simply say, well, you know what, I'm always driven towards that final goal. Not in a bad way necessarily, but sometimes possibly. Sometimes D's are the tornado that whip through town, boom. Sonia, overthinker. I get that. Definitely high C's. Who else? Who else has one that they can identify with on here? It's really interesting to me to know as well. I already know, just so you're aware, when I, not trying to be snide, but when I know your communication style, I already know an obscene amount about you. Oh, Marshall, yes, bleeding D. I'll tell you what, man, that's tough. That is tough to be a D and navigate a world with other people that don't do things as fast as you need them to is very stressful. My dad and I always say that we have all the patience in the world being high Ds because we never use any. Okay, so Tammy, quiet, cautious, very cautious. You're not going to do anything quickly. Carla, easygoing, no problems, no worries. It's all good. Everything's all good. It's my world. Marshall says it's my world. You're just all living in it. That's perfect. He didn't. Sorry, I added the bad part. I added the second part. Lisa, positive. Like to be alone. I need only one option where I can't decide. Oh, decision making. That's really tough, Lisa. Sounds like you're more of a high S. Yeah, Jacqueline D. Yeah, things take longer in teams. Oh my gosh, teams. Why do we need teams? Take control of the situation too quick. Yeah, and that's something, again, it is situational. So just keep in mind, there are things that we're going to talk about that aren't the same across the board. And in different situations, they may merit a little bit of a different reaction. But if we just generalize to get an idea of how we kind of go at a problem or a situation or communication, this is very, very helpful because I can no longer, and I apologize for this, everybody, can no longer walk around being unaware or ignorant of the way I communicate. Sorry, but that's the way it goes. Okay, number 2, throw this in. That was very good. I appreciate the participation. Number 2, so hold on. Justin just pulled his wife into this. We're in trouble. It kills my wife when I don't know when the next check is coming. There's just a whole thought process that the organization system, like there are things when you're dealing with a high C at high SC, like it's very challenging. And then what ends up happening, and this is why we're talking about this today, why David wanted this as a topic, is because if we can't communicate what we're trying to do, be it at home or be at work, how are we going to achieve our goals? If we are fighting just to communicate the idea, we're not going to have enough energy left to actually process and move forward the idea the way it needs to be. So next, which trait is the most beneficial to you, do you think? So I already heard some people actually, interestingly enough, going on the negative. Like, is it soy? I take control of the situation too quick. So that's more of the negative. Let's go on the positive side. What part of your communication style is most beneficial to you? So go ahead and throw that in there. And then you can also put on the negative, which is the least professionally beneficial to you. So some people, right, if you're a high D and you're in a situation that calls for a lot of really fast change, you're perfectly suited for it. But I'll tell you what, if you're a high I and you're expected to sit in a room in front of a computer and not talk to anybody like almost everybody's been doing for the last year and a half, it's going to be really stressful. It's going to be really tough because you need that interaction. We're probably just dying to get onto Zoom with people and talk to people and be around people. I went to my first event, the GLI annual meeting, and I brought my wife, and she, at the end, she said, I was laughing so hard inside at all of you poor extroverts who haven't been out and haven't been able to actually touch another human. I was there hugging people, and I mean, they had different colored lanyards to let you know if anybody's comfortable with that. But I'll tell you what, it was just one of those things. I was like, oh, I appreciate that. So, I think, so include myself in the outcome. Yeah, that's more of a high S. So I think it's important. Yeah, computer person. So I've lived in various worlds where I've had to introvert wise and extrovert wise, but I'm actually an extrovert. But even being an extrovert, I need to have some alone time to recharge. So that can be positive. Real quick, just put in there, what negative traits do you have here that are not really beneficial to you? If you can list those, I think we talked about it a little bit. Barking orders. So for an S, again, you instead of barking orders, you want to include myself in the outcome, which is great. But at the same time, if you, again, assuming you're an S, if you are a high S, one of the negative traits you're going to have is it's going to be tough to make a decision without including everybody else. And of course, everybody's going to have an opinion, right? So that can be difficult. Sometimes Ds, they just move too fast. Is, they make it too much about them, not enough about the team, or they don't follow process necessarily. So an I and a C working together. So think about not just yourselves now, think about people in your life and your work life most specifically that you have a challenging relationship with. They're possibly the opposite of your communication style. So if you're an extrovert, they're probably an introvert. And if you're people-oriented, they're task-oriented. Being overwhelmed or passionate about everything. Yeah, Sonia, that's tough because when we get a lot of times, I think, did you say you were an I? I'm trying to see if you did. So I's get really excited really fast and they jump in 100%. But you also said people think of my decision. Oh yeah, when it's for the best, which is great. Talking prices. Oh, Carla, yeah, talking prices. We don't want to do that. My face should somehow show how I feel. I can't always have a poker face. Most of us cannot. Slow to recognize feelings and others' feelings less beneficial. You know, it's really tough for some people when we're in a business environment, and if we are a DC is the hardest because DCs are very task oriented, not people oriented. And if a DC, this is kind of a joke, but it's actually serious. And I've seen it before with people I've coached. If a DC walks into the office and they have like a very high I or an IS, somebody that's people oriented that works for them. If that DC walks by their office without saying hi and good morning and maybe even asking them how their weekend was, how their cat is or whatever, that I is actually going to feel not violated, but they're going to feel like, what's wrong? What did I do wrong? Like, why are they mad at me? You know what? That DC might have just had to go in and use the restroom. Maybe they had to go grab a coffee real quick. Had nothing to do with you, but the I's will think that something's wrong because a D didn't take time to connect, right? So if you're a D and you don't take that time, just remember it's gonna influence and have an impact on people in ways you don't even think about. Okay, so moving on. I know this is kind of breakneck speed. So just to look at just situations, if you're a high D or if you think you know somebody that's a high D, this is going to give you a little bit of a breakdown. We already talked about the descriptors, okay? The value to the team, which is great. So bottom line organizers, forward thinking, they like to win and they want to finish first. And sometimes, a lot of times it's really important for people to have that in a team, somebody's got to drive. Somebody's got to be the driver. The problem is that if you look over the tendency under stress, the first one we talked about being demanding, if a D sometimes thinks that they're the most important part of the team because they're the biggest and loudest and because they're the driver, they often think that they're more important. And that's definitely not the case. That's why in the beginning, when I said something about the DISC is not a hierarchy, there is not one that's more important than others. We need to have a great mix. So one of the things we do when I have DISC assessments, I'm actually doing a workshop with a client of mine in 2 weeks. Everybody's getting a DISC assessment done. We're bringing everybody in here to LogicWorks, and we're actually going to be doing a group assessment. So we're going to be looking at the group, how everybody's communication style impacts each other. And a lot of times with businesses too like that, if they want to build a team and they have a team or a committee that they want to implement or strategize or something like that, you can make sure that you're putting the right team together, right? So it's really an important factor to place into a team, because the team itself might be strong as individuals, but the team itself may not be able to communicate appropriately if they don't have information about this, so they can learn and shift and change where they need to. The ideal environments, we talked about a little bit about the Ds. They love change. Change is great. My feet fall asleep if I stay in anywhere too long. I want to be able to express my ideas to people and explain why I think things are the case. They don't like to do the same thing again and again. So a lot of times you'll see a D, if you have the owner of a business, or a D that has a place of power, it seems like they jump around all over the place. I's, they're optimistic. We talked about that. I think somebody said, I can motivate like no other, right? People want to follow you. They get excited to have you in the room. They're team players. They motivate. They negotiate. They keep everybody kind of happy and friendly, because if people are upset, there's a problem. The negative side is a little bit that, they like to be liked. And there's a problem, like I think Marlon Brando said, if I'm in a room of 100 people and one of them doesn't like me, I've got to get out of there because they don't like to not be liked. Can be very optimistic. The ideal environment for them, sales is a great place to be for an I. The only negative side of that, in attention to details, as it says over in Possible Limitations, if you got a salesperson and you don't have a CRM or something for them to track their sales contacts or their marketing, you're going to have a big problem. You're going to have to ride them pretty hard. And S, so very dependable, right? They love stability. HR is a wonderful place for somebody who is a high S, or in a position of leadership. If they have people that maybe don't get along so well, they're really good at mediating the situation because they care about everybody's viewpoint, and they want to make sure that everybody is served pretty much equally. It's very important to them. But part of the issue is that they may have a conversation with this person here and yield, and then about the same topic, they'll have a conversation here and they'll yield on that because they don't like controversy. So they're not going to invite a fight. It's just not going to happen. They do not like change. Don't change things for an S. Not a fan at all. So D's need S's, but D's can be really challenging for S's because D's are always going in a different direction, and S's are trying to follow them around saying, well, we just did this last week, or we were just doing this. Why are we changing this? And why are we changing that? They love good, smooth pace, not fast transitions up and down and up and down. It's just too much. So C's, critical thinking. Okay, very high standards, quality control. CPAs are wonderful in this position. Bookkeepers, the attention to detail, controllers in businesses, manufacturing and production. If you're in charge of the operations, it's wonderful because there is a system, there is a place for everything, and everything has a place. And they like to figure out problems when given enough time. If they're not, the one thing that C's do not like is they don't ever like to be wrong. When they get challenged. So you don't challenge a C in front of everybody. It's even if you're right, because it's really rough to be in the position of being a high C and be kind of proven wrong in front of everyone. They take it personal. And as a C, what it does is actually makes you question pretty much everything you do. Say, where else am I wrong? I can't be wrong. And that's okay. And I know I'm exaggerating a little bit, but even from many conversations with my wife who is like that, she's like, well, yeah, if I were ever wrong, that would be uncomfortable. She's not. So anyway, all right. So, so dominant. So how are they motivated? They give them the bottom line. If you've got to communicate with somebody who's dominant, bottom line, be brief. Don't send them a 3-page email. They won't read it. They prioritize challenging opportunities over other maybe more boring or less exciting things. They're limited by impatience. So show them what's expected and moving forward, and then let's go. And they don't like to be taken advantage of. So focus on the solutions and the problems rather than problems. If you're focusing on problems with them, they're not going to be excited. Compliment them publicly. They love to be recognized as winning. They did it first, boom. But then usually they have to get onto something else. They're not going to sit there and revel in that one victory. They're going to look for something else to pick up. And if you're dealing with somebody who's influential, they want social recognition, right? Give them public recognition, awards, let them talk at the Christmas party, whatever it might be. They like to be seen. Focus on the positives with them. Don't be a Debbie Downer. They don't like talking about negative stuff. Don't overload them with details. If you give them too much to do in one sitting, none of it's going to get done. It just isn't. They get overwhelmed and it just kind of shuts down. They just don't do it. They don't like to follow the details. And allow time for them to ask questions if they need to. They don't like to feel like they're losing influence. They don't like to not be liked, and they don't like to not be effective in the business. And don't interrupt them. So sometimes that's hard if you're dealing with an I. The important thing is to look at listening, right? So if you're a D and you're encountering times with an I, by the way, yeah. So some things, yes, you can be all of these at the same time at different levels. Sometimes you can be a high D, sometimes you can be a D and I at the same time. And again, this is why we have the assessment tool to actually give you your specific score. It tells you a lot about who you are. So yes, you can definitely do that. For Marshall, if you're a high D, to be part of a team and not leading that team, good for you, man. You probably really had to adapt a lot. Being part of a team as opposed to leading a team is really tough for a D. So the S's, they're motivated by cooperation, sincerity. So be personable to them. Be patient and kind. Do not confront. Do not put them in an uncomfortable position. Take time to clarify situations, what's expected of them, what's expected of a situation or an initiative, and don't push them into anything too quickly. Let them know how much you care about them, about their loyalty, how interested you are in their lives. C's, if you ever have to talk to a C, and C's, you can confirm this on the call, don't half-ass it. Don't come in ill-prepared with potentially incorrect information. That's the most frustrating thing for a C. A C will actually look at that as an affront and almost a personal slap in the face, that they would actually come to this meeting with you and take up your time, not the thinking you're so important, but just the way that communication goes. And you don't even have the right answers, or maybe you didn't even ask these questions beforehand. Or if you did, you're just kind of, going to Wikipedia and guessing your way through it. That's not okay. So you want to be factual, very detail oriented, be precise, be correct. Mary knows. Be tactful. There is a way. C's like respect. And when you befriend a C, I mean, man, you want a C to be on your side, because once they are, C's may not have a lot of friends, but the ones that they have, friends for life, right? And as opposed to I's, again, who's never met a stranger, right? C's, when you're tactful, you're polite, you're diplomatic and patient with them and how you communicate and correct in the way you communicate, you're going to have a really good friend. Okay, so what we're going to look at real quick, we've got famous Ds. This is great, right? These are people, you can look at this list, that are very, very driven. Most of them, of course, as we look, they're obviously in the public eye. Not simply that they're known. This was a little bit of, actually, I think this slide is before Trump was elected. That's why it just says businessman and not president. So there's, and then again, General Patton, I mean, that's just history. You've seen the picture of him in the tank, pointing. I think that the important thing when we look at these is just being able to identify with these people that we see on the other side. Very direct, very aggressive. They want the end result. Famous eyes. These are almost always actors. Actors, really, 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 they want to be seen. They want people to like them. They're big jokers. They're interesting and all of that. It's wonderful, wonderful. Eyes are so much fun until they're not. They're disruptive. Famous S's, wonderful. Oh man, Charlie Brown is such a great example of that. Nicole Kidman as well. MLK, absolutely. Just calm and cool under pressure. And these are all people you look at, even though I've never met John Denver. I was like, yeah, I think he would have been a really trustworthy guy, just because how he carries himself. And then C's, famous C's. Einstein, Bill Gates, Diane Sawyer, Mr. Spock, of course, and we'll kind of break into that a little bit more. These are C's. These people are very, very calculated, right? There's a wonderful kind of a plot or plan for these television shows and movies that we love, and you'll see why. Everybody is represented in these because we need to see ourselves in this situation. And if you think about some of these, it's perfect, right? So Buzz, Toy Story is great. So Buzz is the high D, Woody is the I, everybody's got to like me. Rex, you remember specifically the line. Of course, I have young kids again, so we're watching all of them over again. I don't like confrontation. Mrs. Potato Head, a C. And the outtakes at the end when she is packing all of his everything in there for his trip. Seinfeld, obviously Jerry's the D, Kramer's the S, Elaine is the I, and George is definitely a C. There's a right way and a wrong way, right? So here's homework. List 3 people. Don't do this in the comment box, especially if you're if there's anybody else from your office here with you, you don't want to name them. List 3 people in your professional life that you have the most difficulty communicating with. It doesn't have to be people that you work with only. It can also be customers of yours, clients of yours, vendors of yours. It doesn't just have to be people within your employment or your team or your company. Okay. So number 1, list 3 people in your professional life that you have the most difficulty communicating with. If you're not sure what that means, I like to say, who makes you the most upset and frustrated professionally? Usually those are the ones that there's a communication issue with. Number 2, so apply some of the learnings from today to take a guess. So what do you think their DISC is? What's important to them as a result of that? Are they more outgoing? Are they more introverted? Are they more task focused? Or are they more people focused? That's how we kind of nail it down. Now, it's not going to be perfect. And again, this isn't a stereotype, just to get kind of a general idea so we can determine what's important to them. Then what we want to do is identify 3 behaviors that you're going to change to improve the communication with these individuals. For example, if I have a high D, that's very challenging for me. One thing that I could do behaviorally is, from now on, if I'm a high C, I've got all this data to send to them. From now on, when I have to send this high D some data that he never reads, I am going to incorporate all that data in the beginning which is just going to be at the top of the email in 3 or 4 bullet points. And then if he wants to read more, that's great, but I know he's at least going to read the bullet points. Boom. So the way I construct my email is going to be different. Okay, if I'm a high D and there's an S or an I, I'm going to make sure one of the things I can do is what? Maybe I can ask them how their day was. How's their weekend? And give myself time. Don't ask them how the weekend is and get on my phone and not listen and answer emails, but actually sit there and listen to them. Because if that's important to them, you want them to feel really comfortable in the way that they're being communicated with, right? Your job in a leadership position is to create a safe emotional environment for people to operate. That's what this is about. And then 4. So take this, you can do a screenshot or whatever works. There's only 3 steps really. So take these steps and go ahead and email them to me. I mean, today, if at all possible, and it's still early. So email this to me. And then what I want you to do then is I want you to set a reminder in your phone or on your calendar. So a week from today, so next Wednesday, by the end of the day, I want you to send me an email to let me know what happened. If you would like to sit down, thank you very much for that. There's my email address. If you'd like to sit down and talk about it, we can talk about it. If you want to get a real factual disc assessment for yourself, we can do that. Dave, if you want to go ahead and send them the the sample report, you'll be able to download that right now, and David will let you know exactly how to do that within the software. I think if you click on, I'll try this, David. If you click on the files button that just had that little red dot on it, you will most likely see this sample report. Yep, disk self sample report. So it's just going to give you an example of what a report looks like, and you can just see a little bit more about what that is, what that means. So if you want to set up a call to talk about this stuff, I can, but at the very least, send me an email with this information. If you want to set up a call, let me know. Either way, put a note in there to call me back next week and let me know what you've done and what has worked. Okay, I think that's pretty much it, David. So if you want to jump back on, if there's any questions, anything that I missed, let me get back over to the screen. Questions, thank you. Yeah, that's it for me. So I'm up for any questions if anybody has any, or if anybody wants to complain and say that I miscategorized them or that's not who I am.
No, this was spectacular, and it's so helpful to understand the different categories and how to talk to different people, and being able to quickly identify and adjust your style. Your presentation style when you meet somebody you're in a meeting. So understanding your profile and others' profiles is really important.
Yeah. And also, so when if you do want an assessment, go ahead and email me. It's normally $100. It includes the assessment and kind of a call to evaluate, but I'll go ahead and I'll give you guys a discount because David's such a nice guy. Bless you, by the way, David. I saw you teasing. And but yeah, when you take a look at if you're not sure if you want one, go ahead and take a look at the sample report, and it really is kind of cool. Well, not kind of cool. It's really cool whenever you can see what you're really like. You're like, oh, that's how they know so much about me.
Yeah. And the bottom line, and a couple of folks, I think Sonia was talking about this early in the chat about how important it is to communicate, to be able to do it clearly. And these tools are just the very starting point to have clear communications with your team and really drive your success going forward.
Yeah, and one last thing I'll say about that, I think Stephen Cuppy talks about the speed of trust. If I don't trust you, that means when you communicate with me, I've got to stop and try and figure out how much of what you're saying to me is true and untrue, and then formulate what my response is going to be. That completely and totally stifles communication. Yeah. So all of the stuff we talk about today is to strengthen that communication and make it easier for us to get stuff done.
Right. Just to build on that, I can't say where I was just reading this, I think yesterday, but the most effective leaders, when they go into a new environment, let's say a new CEO goes into a company, it takes like 3 months. The most successful ones spend about 3 months just building that trust and building the culture before they do anything, to change the company or change direction or strategy or whatever. So,
yeah.
And those are the most effective leaders.
Yeah. Instead of once a try, they have like, all right, I have 3 weeks to push my agenda.
Yeah. Right.
Let's see how it goes. Yeah, that's a really good point, Dave.
We've all experienced that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Hopefully on the receiving side. But even it's okay. I mean, we're not perfect. We're just trying to learn. I think that's what's important. Is just try and learn. Be aware.
Yeah. So everybody's saying thank you, and I do too.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was very good today. Very enlightening.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And again, reach out to me. You've got my email. I'd be happy to communicate with anybody that I can help communicate better. I just absolutely love it because they just have this wake up call. Oh, I always thought so-and-so didn't like me. Like, no. That's really not it at all. Just, you can't before 8 o'clock, can't do it. Like my wife can't talk to her before her coffee in the morning. Just won't do it. And I want to get into stuff because I'm all excited, a morning person. She's like, no. So here I'm thinking she's mad at me. She just needs time. So it's all good.
Well, Foster, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing everything. And again, everyone, we'll send you a copy this afternoon of the replay, and I'll attach the slides to it. Not the slides, but the DISC assessment as well. So you'll have that a second time, just in case you were unable to download it today. And then I'll make sure that you have Foster's email so you can contact him. I would encourage you to get involved with Foster. He's a great coach, great mentor, and a great leader.
Thanks, David.
Thank you so much. And with that, we'll call it a day. We'll see you next Wednesday. So have a good week, everybody.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care. Communicate effectively. See ya.
See ya.